Welcome to Smart, Successful and Stressed Mums, the podcast for professional mums who are doing it all. I'm Jazmin, mum of two, qualified social worker and lover of personal and professional development. And I know firsthand what it's like to juggle career, parenting and everything in between. Here, we dive into real conversations about motherhood, career, health, well-being, and the daily balancing act that comes with it. You'll hear from experts in the field, as well as everyday professional mums sharing their stories, struggles, and wins. So grab your favorite hot drink or reheat the one you forgot about, and let's get into it. Welcome to episode 1 of the Smart, Successful and Stressed podcast. I'm so thrilled that you've joined me and can't wait to support you on your journey as a professional mum, tackling some of the topics such as the perfect mum myth, time management strategies for busy professional mums, and much more. And I'm actually recording in a studio today. I decided that I really wanted to make this experience as seamless as possible, but it didn't turn out that way. So I wanted to start off this podcast in letting you know some of the barriers that I had in attempting to record this today. So before we jump into our very first podcast episode, I wanted to take you behind the scenes in my day prior to doing this first ever recording. This morning I had an appointment and they were running late, so that made me run behind my podcast studio booking. When I arrived nearby to the podcast studio, there was no parking available whatsoever. So I found myself circling around inner city Melbourne for at least 15 minutes trying to find a park that either wasn't a no standing, a clear way, customer only parking for stalls in which I was not intending to shop at, or 1 hour parking, or permit only. So it proved quite the challenge to actually get a park. I became increasingly more frustrated the more times I'd circled around the same streets trying to find a park. Not to mention that I had things with me, including some tech equipment, of which I didn't really need any of it because the studio is very well equipped. Also my lunch and some other things, some other essentials. So by the time I arrived to the podcast studio, I was already half an hour past my appointment booking. And then trying to navigate the technical equipment when I have quite limited tech skills, including no sound coming out of the headphones, facing with a window behind me, was putting a halo light all over me, and all sorts of other things. So by the time I started recording, it was 2 hours after I'd intended to. I've lost quite a bit of time, but I always like to draw attention to the human element of social media. Because a lot of what this podcast is going to be about is trying to really smash the stereotype and the myth of the perfect mum, of the perfect female employee, of the perfect woman. So I thought it was really important to share some of the challenges that I'd had prior to recording. So you know that I also some days don't have it all together, and that this is a journey that we're all going through. And I do share behind the scenes in some challenges that I have, in parenting and the juggle of the work-life balance. So now that you have that background, let's jump into the very first episode. If we haven't connected before, it's so great to have you here. I've worked for over 10 years in various roles as a social worker, and I've worked a lot with parents as well as directly with children and young people. And there were certainly a lot of common themes that I would see for mums in particular, and some of the things that I had noticed was the ongoing feelings of guilt at not being able to be present as much as they'd like to in their child's education, late drop-offs to school, late pickups at school, and just struggling with overwhelming feelings of stress and feeling that they're not good enough, that they're not enough, that they're failing, that by working so many hours, they're failing their child. And if they weren't working enough, then the financial implications meant that they felt that they were further. So it became my passion to try and uplift and support my fellow professional mums out there. I'm a mum of 2 girls, both in primary school, and these are definitely struggles that I've had as well. So we're all in this journey together. It's really important to acknowledge it, that you're not alone in feeling like that, and that there's so many others, myself included, that have these feelings quite regularly, if not daily. In this first episode, we're going to be talking about the perfect mum myth and then where that comes from. When I was in my early 20s, prior to having children, I'd had quite an unpleasant breakup. And my sister, as a bit of a joke at the time, bought me a book, and I think it was called The Perfect Wife Guide, or How to Be the Perfect Wife. I can't really remember the title of it, but because it amused me so much, I still have it at home. And in this book, it very traditional. It appeared to have images that were more from the 1950s and 60s potentially, and it spoke about a few expectations of the good mother, including that she should ensure that when her husband comes home from work, that she's always beautifully presented with her hair and makeup freshly done for her husband's arrival, that as the husband would be tired from work, that she should ensure to keep the children away from him and keep them really quiet as to not cause him stress, that the dinner should be essentially waiting for the husband and that he should be served first because he's the provider. At the time, being in my early 20s and certainly not a traditional female and not wanting to subscribe to any of those traditional roles, I just laughed at my sister for buying me this book. But now that I'm a mum, I can definitely see some of these perfect mum stereotypes that are very much alive and well and prevalent in our society today. Firstly, one of the myths is that women don't have a profession other than caring for children. Of course, we know that there's different types of mums. Some mums are stay-at-home mums, and they're amazing at what they do in navigating all the challenges that go with caring for children, navigating a house and all the things that go with that, budgeting the family's finances and all sorts of things. And then we've got working mums such as myself. Although some of these topics may also be helpful to my stay-at-home mums out there, this podcast is really designed for the working mum, because that's where the majority of both my own professional experience but also my own lived experience as a working mum. A lot of the topics will be really more focused and relevant to professional mums. But there is that myth that the good mother doesn't work outside the home. The good mother is at home waiting for her partner to arrive, and that the good mother has really well-behaved children at all times. And given that if you're listening to this, you'll most likely be a mum as well, and you will know that our children are not perfectly behaved. They're not well behaved at all times. You may go to a really quiet environment like a library or a church or a really elderly relative's house, or you might be visiting someone in hospital or a nursing home, and we know that children aren't just silenced. We know that children don't just become silent in these environments. If they're distressed or upset about something, if they've got a bee in their bonnet prior to entering these quiet spaces, then they're not going to all of a sudden remain still and quiet. Children are unpredictable. So that's one of the myths that absolutely is not based on any type of reality. But often, despite the fact that we know better, that we know that the notion of the perfect mum doesn't exist and that it's not real, sometimes it's our unconscious thoughts that can reinforce that stereotype of the perfect mum. And it's often reinforced by what we see on social media. And there's so many content creators out there who are mums who always look immaculately presented. They spend hours making the quote perfect lunchbox for their children with different shaped sandwiches. They may have like 6 different shapes of cookie cutter they use to cut fruit, and it just looks so well presented. And so many content creators who do these amazing lunchboxes, like that's their business. They've made a living out of that. And I must admit, I've been inspired by some of their content as well. But then I keep returning to the fact that that's not my business. I'm not in the business of creating these lavish lunchboxes for a social media audience. So I shouldn't sort of subscribe to that as being the ideal, or that's something I should aim for as having the perfect lunchbox. So that's just an example of how sometimes what we consume on social media can actually reinforce the perfect mum myth or the perfect mum stereotype. These podcast episodes are going to be bite-sized. I know we're all super busy, and because we are all super busy and we're always going from school or childcare drop-off, we're going in between appointments, we might be going to the gym, going to work, meetings. These are designed to listen to on your commute when you have downtime. I really hope that this has been helpful to you. Just to do a quick summary of what we've spoken about in our very first episode of Smart, Successful and Stressed is the perfect mum myth and where that comes from, and how what we can watch or listen to on social media can perpetuate that. And also to consider the purpose of a lot of the social media content is really to generate business. So these mums who are creating these amazing lunchboxes, often they're sponsored posts for different brands. So they have to present these lunchboxes in a certain way aesthetically for the brand who are funding that particular piece of content. So if this very first episode has been helpful to you, I would love it if you would share it with another mum who really needs to hear these messages. Thank you so much for tuning in to Smart, Successful and Stressed.